The deal sounded too good to be true, and maybe that's why Mark couldn't resist. A small cabin tucked away by the lake, sold at a county auction for just 25 cents. The room had laughed when the gavel slammed, but Mark saw something no one else did: opportunity. It wasn't just an old cabin, it was a chance to rebuild his life after years of scraping by. The cabin was abandoned, walls cracked, roof sagging, yet it felt alive. Every weekend, Mark drove out to restore it. He replaced shingles with his own hands, sanded floors late into the night, and planted flowers along the porch. Neighbors stopped by, curious. Some mocked him for wasting effort on a shack, but others admired his determination. 1 year later, Mark stood in front of the same cabin, but now it gleamed. The lake shimmered at sunrise, and property developers had their eyes on the entire waterfront. A single phone call confirmed it: his cabin, once dismissed as worthless, now sat on land appraised at $10 million, but where there's fortune, trouble isn't far behind. Just when Mark thought his struggles had paid off, a letter appeared in his mailbox stamped with bold letters: Homeowners Association. It claimed his cabin wasn't his at all, and that was only the beginning. Mark sat at the cabin's porch, hands trembling as he read the letter again. The HOA declared that the land fell under their jurisdiction and demanded immediate compliance with their rules or surrender of the property. The arrogance in the words stung. He had bought the cabin legally at auction. He had poured sweat and soul into it. How could they claim it? He called the county clerk, desperate for answers. The clerk assured him the deed was ironclad. But when Mark pressed further, she lowered her voice: "You've stirred up something bigger than you realize. That HOA has been eyeing lakefront properties for years. Your cabin? It's the crown jewel." The next week, HOA representatives arrived unannounced. A woman in a sharp blazer, who introduced herself only as Karen, HOA president, stood on his porch like she already owned it. Behind her, 2 men in suits carried clipboards. She smiled thinly. "Nice place you've got here, Mark. Shame it's not really yours." Mark laughed, but her tone made his stomach tighten. Karen pulled out a folder filled with papers. "This cabin falls under the HOA's community charter. You never paid fees, never filed paperwork. You're trespassing." Mark clenched his fists. He knew she was bluffing, but her confidence suggested she had a plan. A plan designed to take everything. What started as a letter became a full-blown campaign. HOA notices appeared on his door weekly: threats of fines, threats of foreclosure. Neighbors whispered about secret meetings where Karen bragged about soon owning the cabin. Developers showed up with contracts, waving million-dollar offers as if Mark would break under pressure, but Mark wasn't alone. His old friend Daniel, a real estate lawyer, stepped in. Together they pored over every line of the deed, every county record. The truth was clear: the HOA had no legal standing. They were fabricating rules, hoping intimidation would work. Still, Karen escalated. One morning, Mark arrived to find orange spray paint across his porch: HOA property. Another day, a stranger was parked in his driveway, claiming Karen had leased him the cabin. Each attack chipped away at Mark's peace. Finally, the HOA made their boldest move yet. They filed a lawsuit claiming the original auction was invalid. In court, Karen stood tall, declaring the cabin belonged to the community. She painted Mark as a squatter stealing from families. Gasps filled the room, but then, Daniel smiled and handed the judge a file. It contained a single overlooked clause in county law, one that not only proved Mark's ownership but revealed something shocking about the HOA's dealings. The courtroom erupted as Daniel revealed the truth. The HOA had quietly been skimming funds from homeowners for years, funneling money into shell companies that purchased surrounding land. The cabin wasn't just their target, it was the final piece in a long game of corruption. Karen's smug smile faltered. The judge ordered an investigation, but the HOA wasn't done. Days later, inspectors showed up at the cabin, citing violations. Broken shutters, chipped paint, even grass too tall. Each fine totaled thousands. Mark felt cornered. If he couldn't pay, they could still force foreclosure, but fate twisted again. A local news reporter caught wind of his story. Soon, cameras rolled on the lakefront, capturing Karen's intimidation attempts. Neighbors who once ignored him now rallied. "We never voted for this," they shouted. The HOA board fractured as secrets spilled. Then came the developer's offer again, but this time for a staggering $10 million, confirmed in writing. Mark refused. "This cabin isn't for sale. Not now. Not ever." Karen's fury burned. She warned him, "You'll regret this." But Mark sensed the tide shifting. The HOA's empire was cracking, and the final blow was closer than anyone realized. The investigation deepened. County officials uncovered forged signatures, missing funds, and illegal filings tied directly to Karen. News headlines blasted across the region, HOA president accused of fraud. For Mark, vindication felt sweet, but it wasn't over. The HOA tried one last desperate tactic, claiming eminent domain. They argued the cabin's land was essential to the community's growth. The case went back to court. This time, Mark didn't just defend himself, he countered. He presented the developer's appraisal proving the land's true worth, $10 million. He showed receipts of every repair he made, proving sweat equity no one could deny. And then came the bombshell. Daniel uncovered proof that the HOA had illegally rented out other foreclosed homes. Pocketing profits, the judge's gavel fell hard. The HOA's claims were dismissed. Karen was removed as president pending criminal charges. And Mark? His ownership was declared absolute and permanent, but the real twist came afterward. Developers, once circling like vultures, now lined up with offers. Mark looked out at the lake, his cabin glowing in the sun. A cabin bought for 25 cents, now worth $10 million, and thanks to his fight, the HOA would never touch it again. Life after victory was surreal. Neighbors stopped by with congratulations, some apologizing for doubting him. Strangers mailed letters, calling him the man who beat the HOA. Offers still poured in, some climbing past $10 million, but Mark shook his head every time. The cabin had become more than property. It was a symbol of resilience, of justice, of standing firm when everything seemed against you. Yet even as peace returned, Mark couldn't forget the look in Karen's eyes that last day in court, rage mixed with fear. She had lost everything, and rumors swirled that she was plotting revenge, but for now, Mark stood tall. On the anniversary of buying the cabin, he hosted a gathering on the porch. Friends, neighbors, even county officials came. Music played, children laughed by the lake, and Mark raised a glass to the cabin that changed everything. And as the sun dipped into the horizon, painting the water gold, Mark realized something. This wasn't just his victory. It was a warning to every HOA that thought power meant ownership, because sometimes, the smallest cabin can spark the biggest fight. The final blow came months later, when the county released its full report. Karen and several HOA board members were charged with fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power. One headline read, "Lake HOA collapses after scandal." The association dissolved entirely, its influence erased. Mark drove out to the lake that evening, standing on the dock as waves lapped gently. The cabin behind him stood brighter than ever, its windows glowing in the twilight. He remembered that day at auction, the laughter when he raised his hand to bid 25 cents. They had called him foolish. Now, the cabin was priceless, not because of money, but because of the journey. Developers still called. Offers still rose. But Mark always answered the same, not for sale. He had already won the greatest prize, peace, freedom, and a home no one could take away. And the HOA? They never saw it coming. Their empire of fear crumbled because one man refused to bow, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.